All right, give it a couple minutes here. Let some more people trickle in. Hopefully this will be beneficial for you guys. This is a topic that I presented on a couple years ago, and it was very popular. Had a lot of positive feedback and good participation. So I think people found it beneficial. So I wanted to do it again. Had some people asking about this exact topic, so I thought it would be topical. It's been a while, and it's kind of timeless topic, so should be really good. If you signed up, you should already have the spreadsheet. I think my assistant sent out the spreadsheet maybe 10-15 minutes ago, so check your inbox. You should have that spreadsheet. You don't really need it for the webinar because you're kind of going to be watching me go through it. So even if you don't have it, don't stress about it. More important to just watch and learn, and then you'll have the replay that you can reference later when you're doing your own analysis. So welcome, guys. Still got some people trickling in. Seems like Facebook is up now. All right. Let's give it another few seconds here. Still got some people coming in. We had about 70 or 80 signups, and we only marketed for a few days, really. So should not too bad. Yeah, thankfully I am here to give this because I had my apartment cleaned today. So I stepped out with my dog to just get out of their way, and they locked the door, and I didn't bring a key with me, and they locked me out. So I had to call a locksmith, and I just barely got in the apartment to give this. So I was a little stressed there for a little bit, but all worked out. All right, it's 2 past, so we can go ahead and get started. So first of all, just welcome. Thank you for attending. This is how to analyze a rental property. So the focus for this, the mission of today, is to teach the new investor, a first-time property investor, or someone that's maybe you have 1 or 2 properties, but you just want a more sophisticated kind of streamlined method for analyzing your deals going forward. That's what we're going to focus on today. Is I'm going to give you the template, the system that you can follow to analyze your deals going forward. And hopefully I can do it in 20 minutes. I think that's a realistic goal, that you can analyze a property in about 20 minutes. Once you have the system, once you know it, it's actually pretty easy. It seems daunting for a lot of people their first time, but once you understand what goes into it, it's not too hard. So with that, a little bit about myself, my background, how this came about was I started investing in property back in 2011. So that was when I bought my first duplex. And at the time I was active duty Air Force. So I was flying the B-1 bomber, and I was stationed in Rapid City, South Dakota. So I was being stationed up there. So I decided that rather than sign a new lease in a new city, I wanted to buy a property, stop paying rent, and start collecting rent, right? If you can imagine, 2011, there was a lot of heat around the real estate market, a lot of chatter, if you will. So I wanted to get involved, and I started looking at duplexes in the area, and ultimately found a property that I was satisfied with. Now, at the time, I didn't have the system. I didn't have any mentorship or really anything to go by. It was really just common sense, kind of back of the napkin, back of the envelope math. And that ended up working fine, which I think is a testament to real estate, that as long as you have some common sense and you just take some time to think things through, to try and think ahead of, hey, what kind of problems could I potentially run into with this property, or just in general being a landlord, and how can I account for those? How can I mitigate any risks that I might be taking? Then generally you're going to do okay over the long run. You know, you might run into some speed bumps along the way. You might have some kind of periods where you struggle a little bit, but overall, time heals all wounds in real estate. And that's why I love real estate. So I bought that property in 2011. I had a tenant on one side, a roommate living with me. So between the two, my expenses were paid for. And that's what began my investing journey. A couple of years later, I bought another property. A couple of years after that, I bought another property. So every time I bought a property, I get a little bit more sophisticated in how I was kind of running those numbers. Now I started to have some historical data on my own properties of, hey, here's kind of what things actually cost, and could build out some rule of thumbs. And then eventually started getting in more involved in the real estate community and really started to kind of hone in on how to do things properly, if you will. Now, so that's who the target of this webinar, like I said, the first time investor. Now, if you're someone that at the end of this webinar, you decide that, hey, this isn't for me, I don't want to go through all this work, or I don't want to try and learn this new thing. I have a job and I do that well, and I'd rather just avoid this. Maybe you feel like it'll be a headache of being a landlord. There is some work involved for sure, and there are some risks. So if that's you, that's okay too. Another thing that I do is I offer passive real estate investing opportunities to my investors. So I have commercial grade real estate investments that I bring outside investors into. So they're partners in the deal. They can put up as little as, sometimes $25,000 to $50,000 to be a passive investor. So they don't have to do any work. They don't have any responsibility in the deal. They just are a partner in the deal. They own equity. They have an ownership stake, but they don't have any responsibility. So they just kind of collect a check and share in the profits. So with that, with Mach 1 Equity, I've got a few live projects right now. Biggest deal will be a 232 unit apartment complex in Houston that is going really well. We bought that. It was like 70% occupied. It was a heavy ad deal, and that's going good. We've reached stabilization. We're hanging out around 90% occupancy. And I think in the long term, that's going to be really good. We had our first exit in March. We built a professional office building in Loveland, Colorado. We're able to return 18% to our investors, and that was building through the COVID pandemic. So we were really happy with where that panned out. There was definitely a little stressful when the pandemic was at its peak and inflation was kicking in and lumber doubled in price and all our contractors are raising their prices, et cetera, et cetera. But overall, luckily, we had a good deal, solid footing, and we made it out okay. And that was, we were really happy with the way that turned out. And then I've got some exciting projects on the horizon, looking at a couple industrial development deals, as well as a build to rent community. So really excited for those. If that's something you're interested in, you can find me on mach1equity.com and reach out to me there. And then we can talk if that's something you're interested in. All right. So let's get into it. So first, I'm going to kind of just walk through step by step how to kind of briefly find a property using the MLS or sort of the public listing services. And we'll take a look at, kind of just how you build the picture of a property, how you gather the data necessary to do your analysis. All right. So let's hop in. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we will get into it. All right, so there's my contact info. So if you have any questions after this webinar or, just in general, you want to talk about real estate, you can find me at mach1equity.com. You can email me at keegan@mach1equity.com, and you can always give me a ring as well. So step one, first step is actually to get educated, right? So good news is you're already on your way on your journey, because that's why we're here. We're here to get educated, and I'm going to teach you the process. So good job. Step one complete, or in process, I should say. All right, step two. So you got to actually find a property. Now, backing up a little bit, you're going to want to narrow in on your target market. So whether that's local to you and you have identified that you'd want to just invest in your backyard, there's nothing wrong with that. You can make money in real estate anywhere. If you want to invest out of state, now a lot of people in, say, California, they don't want to pay the high taxes or deal with the political risk that a lot of markets bring with things like rent control and the like, then maybe you want to invest out of state. Then you're going to want to do some market research to narrow in on your target market. And that's not really the focus here today. So I'm not going to spend any time on that, but I will just say you can visit my YouTube channel. I have some videos on how to choose a real estate market. So you can go to mach1equity.com, go to click on learn webinars, and you can find how to analyze a real estate market. And that'll walk you through step by step. So, okay. Now, this is the Black Hills MLS. So today I'm going to be using Rapid City, South Dakota as our target market. And that's because I'm familiar with the market. I own property in the market. So I have a good sense of the assumptions that I need to use when analyzing a deal in this market. And I think this is a good representation of a lot of markets in the US. It's kind of a tertiary market. It's a little over 100,000 people. So it's not a huge market. Certainly not, a primary or secondary market. It's a tertiary market, but it's probably a good representation of a lot of kind of Midwestern, sort of middle America markets, right? In terms of prices and rents and things like that. So this is their MLS, the Black Hills MLS. Now, every market is going to be a little bit different on how you access the MLS. So one of the ways you can do that is often your real estate agents on their websites will have the MLS kind of plugged into their websites. So that's a good source, or sometimes it's just market dependent. So you're just gonna have to do a little bit of digging to find that MLS and then get on here. And you can get pretty far with Zillow and Redfin as well. That's fine too. Don't use the Z estimate from Zillow. That doesn't really mean anything, but for finding listings, those are fine. And then of course, find a good agent in the market to help you. Okay. So first thing we're going to do, we're always going to go kind of big to small. So as you can see, Rapid City, what I did was I just searched and I filtered for multifamily properties only, because that's what I'm interested in. Maybe you want to find a single family, that's fine. I didn't want to do that. I'm just a multifamily guy. So you just start big to small and just kind of get a feel for what's out there. There's not a lot of properties for sale here, and most of them are already under contract. As you can see, there's only 3 properties in all of Rapid City that are not under contract. So still seller's market, right? But you'll come in, you'll click on a property, and again, you're just looking at the big picture, what is out there. And initially you're just going to kind of give yourself a little self-guided tour, if you will, of what's out there, so that you can start building that mental picture of, hey, what do things in this market kind of go for on a per unit basis? Is this a market where you can typically pick up a Class B rental for $140,000 a unit, or is it going to cost you $180,000 a unit? And that's going to depend on the market. It's going to depend on the rates. You got to keep in mind that with the residential properties, they're based on comparables, as opposed to in your commercial properties, all based on the income, but it's all based on comparables. So you're working with agents and appraisers to figure out, what a property is worth based on what similar properties in the area have sold for, right? So as you gain an understanding of your market, you'll start to build that mental picture of, okay, what do things generally kind of trade for? And that way you can generally at a glance know, okay, a duplex for $520,000, that's probably way too expensive for an investment in Rapid City, South Dakota. Now, this is obviously Class A, that they went really modern and kind of high end with this, but that's not always a good thing. Sometimes if you're the most unique property in the market, then sometimes that can kind of work against you. But hey, this is a really nice property. So maybe if you're targeting the high-end luxury units and that's your niche, then maybe this is exactly what you're looking for. It's probably not for me, but you're going to come in, you're going to look at the pictures and just start to build your mental picture of what's out there. Now, there's always going to be a description. So read through the description. You're going to start gathering information that you'll use during the analysis portion, right? So this is kind of almost a pre-analysis portion, right? We haven't started a proper analysis. Now we're just really what we're doing is we're looking for red flags that might disqualify a property based on what our personal criteria are. So maybe you're someone that wants turnkey properties like this, that you can buy and not do a thing to and just manage and run. Maybe you're someone that's looking for some value add where you can actually fix up and renovate a property and build some equity that way, kind of some forced appreciation, right? So, and usually MLS, it's like this where it'll give a brief description, maybe some specifics about the features of the building or the property. So you're going to want to go through and just kind of look at all that and just figure out, okay, it's on city water and sewer. That's good. Obviously, if it's on like a well or something, maybe that's not the best for a rental property. Maybe you're not scared by that, but really it depends on your background, what your comfort level is, right? So, and if it fits your niche again. So if you're a Class A investor, maybe this fits your niche. I'm not generally looking for this type of property, at least in this market. So that's probably not going to work. So what I did was I went through and I just kind of clicked on some of these. I'm not going to go through and click on all of them and waste your time, but what I did was I found this property. Now this property is currently under contract, but whatever, this is just for an analysis. So I actually reached out to the broker and I had him send me some info. But first I just, like I said, I come to the MLS listing. I'm going to go through what are the first impressions. So this, okay, it's a pretty cute little property. It's got some personality, I guess. Looking here, it's like, okay, yeah, I might get rid of those bushes. They're a little disheveled, but other than that, okay, it's got like a nice concrete path around it. It's not too bad. It's not in bad shape. It doesn't look neglected, right? It looks like it's in well cared for, well kept. So I'm kind of creating a story in my mind about this property. Okay, who would rent this? What type of person would rent this? Is this going to be, a blue collar type person, or is this going to be like a white collar, or is it more of a student apartment? I don't know. So I'm just going to go through, okay, these retaining walls. So right away I'm like, okay, they're in good shape. If they weren't in good shape, that would be more of a factor, because that could be something that now you have to deal with at some point, right? So at this point, they look like they're in good shape, so I'm not too concerned about it. But as you go through every level of your kind of due diligence process, it's almost like peeling back an onion. You're getting a little deeper and deeper toward the core, right? Oh, wow, huge garage. So I'm thinking, okay, that's potentially additional income. You could rent a garage unit. Now you maybe have to do a little bit of research, figure out what a garage might go for in that unit or that market, but that's interesting. Okay. Dedicated laundry room. That's very intriguing. I think dedicated laundry is going to be very attractive to, especially if someone that has a family. I mean, that's a selling point, right? So that's probably a feature that I want to highlight when I list this property if I decide to buy it, right? So that's definitely good to know and good to keep in the back of my mind. Maybe that justifies being slightly above market of a comparable unit that does not have a dedicated laundry room, right? I think if you're a family that has young kids, that's probably a feature that's very attractive. And then I'm just going to go through the pictures. Okay, looks pretty clean. Maybe a little bit dated. Maybe the appliances could be improved or replaced. Appliances aren't too expensive. Does it have good bones? Maybe the countertops aren't, they're obviously not granite. So this is definitely probably, a B- C+ type property. So that's going to inform my decisions on what it can get for rent. And then I'm also thinking about what kind of work would I need to do if I bought this to get it up to a level where I'm kind of addressing any deferred maintenance. Personally, if I'm buying a property, often you like to just put some money into it up front so that you kind of get that over with. You get the rents up to market immediately. And it depends on the property. Sometimes maybe you want to ride it out and wait to do any major renovations for a few years. But that kitchen, I'd say, okay, yeah, it could use some improvements, but it's not like a complete tear down. You could put lipstick on that, right? Okay, now we're getting through. So we're in a bedroom. Right away, I noticed drop ceiling. So that's a minus, right? nobody wants a drop ceiling generally, but not the end of the world. It is still a rental, but it's definitely a hit, but maybe on your listing photos, maybe you can, well, I generally don't advise ever like hiding things, right? But it's just something to consider. Okay, so now I've gone through the pictures. I'm not going to go through every single one, but that's the idea. You want to get an idea of kind of what this is, and it seems pretty nice. Seems like it's well kept. Okay, now I'm going to read the description, and I'm going to look for red flags, anything that's a disqualifier for me that I don't want to deal with. If it says, it has some major issue or something, or maybe it has Section 8 tenants, and maybe that's not my bag. Maybe I don't do Section 8. I don't understand the red tape of the bureaucracy of that. So I'm going to avoid it. Doesn't mean they're bad investments, but generally that's a niche that someone fits into, right? So I'm gonna read the description. I'm gonna continue to gather information, continue to build that picture. And if I'm still interested, then the next step is I'm gonna text or email the agent. You can call them if you want, but generally I would just say, shoot them a text or an email requesting additional info, because this is not all the info, right? What they're gonna be able to send you is kind of all your in-place rents, what are your expenses, income and expenses, your in-place rents, your disclosures, anything that you need to know. So just text or email. I just texted this guy last night and said, hey, I'm interested in this property that you got listed at 314 East New York. Can you send me the info? Here's my email. And boom, he sent it over that night. And now I'm not going to show that. I would show it, but it has some personal, he didn't redact some of the personal information for like some of the tenants and the seller. So I don't feel comfortable just blasting that out on a live feed, but I've got the important points for us tonight to use. So as you're waiting for that, so now you've decided, okay, you know what, this is something I'm potentially interested in. The price, $249 for duplex in Rapid City, based on kind of building the picture of what things trade for. That seems pretty reasonable. Okay, he's got some info on the rents here. It's a 3-bed, 1-bath and a 2-bed, 1-bath. And he's got some info on the in-place rents. They've got pets. And he's saying, okay, 2 garage spaces for $50 each a month. That is, like I said, good income. Okay. What's nice about pet fees and things like garages is it's income that doesn't add, there's no overhead, there's no expenses to having pet, really. If it's a pet proof apartment, if you have carpet, maybe that's a consideration, right? So the next thing I'm going to do, maybe while I'm waiting for the agent to get back, is I'm going to map the property. So first thing I'm going to do is bring up Google Maps and just get a sense for, okay, where in Rapid City is this property? And since I'm familiar with the market, what I know, like some of my rules of thumb. So we have this major thoroughfare, Omaha Street here. Anything north of that, generally, I would say is Class C. Maybe there's some pockets of Class D. Some of this is very subjective, right? But I'm going to say anything above that is generally kind of a Class C property. So I'm not going to get a Class B tenant, generally speaking, in those areas. But it's also, this one is kind of in an interesting location to me because it's right by this park here. So it's kind of, you could say it's maybe on the line, and it's not kind of deep into the cut, right? So maybe I say, you know what, if I get this place to the quality of a Class B, maybe I'm not getting a true Class B rent level, but maybe I'm just below it. Maybe I can exceed what your typical Class C is getting, just based on where it is, right? So yeah, I'm not afraid of this area. So I'm gonna dive a little further. And then the next step would be maybe to do a Google Street Maps. So I'm gonna bring up Google Streets and I'm gonna take a look at the property. So, okay, boom, first thing I notice, these ugly hedges that look awful, right? This terrible landscaping. So now I'm informing, okay, if I buy this place, I'm going to rip that out and I'm going to make the curb appeal nice. I mean, you look those pictures, there's a reason that this picture is not in the listing, right? Because the guy knows this is ugly as heck, right? So does it scare me? No, I think that's something that's easily remedied. You hire a couple guys, tear that out in a day, and put in some nice looking plants or shrubs or whatever, and boom, you've got some curb appeal. Maybe you'll want to take a close look at this retaining wall to see if that's going to be an issue. But other than that, just looking at the other pictures of the actual yard, it looked generally in pretty good shape, right? Then you're just going to look at the neighborhood in general. Okay, it's got dedicated off-street parking in addition to that garage with the driveway, so there's plenty of parking in this place. And I'm just going to kind of use Google Streets to just look at the neighborhood, right? So right away, I'm noticing, okay, there's this big building right across the street. Now I know this is an ice rink. So if you're buying a home for yourself, maybe you don't want to live next to that. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't matter to you. But a rental, does that scare me? Probably not. I think I'm fine with that. If anything, maybe it's a positive because you're limiting the amount of, I guess, potential for problematic neighbors or something. I don't know. But generally, I'm just looking around. So again, not the best landscaping. Now, one thing to take note is this Google map is December 2021. So this is your winter landscaping when everything's dead, right? So what does this stuff look like in the summer? Maybe it looks a lot better in the summer. I don't know, or the spring. So, just something to keep in mind, right? And then you're going to want to look at the neighbors' houses to see how are they kept up. Do they keep their lawns trimmed, or do they have 3-foot high grass in the lawn? What kind of cars do they have? Do they have a bunch of hoopties, a bunch of beaters, or are they decent cars? And again, I know this isn't a class A, class B area, so I'm not expecting to see BMWs and Mercedes, but as long as it doesn't look like you're in the ghetto, you're fine, right? And this looks generally okay. Again, it's probably not the nicest, but it's nothing that so far that I'm scared about. And if I was doing this for real, I'd probably go around the block and really get familiar. I'm not going to do all of that for you right now. But that's basically what you're going to want to do. All right. And now, so let's imagine that the realtor has sent you the information. So now what you're going to do is you're going to review that information that he sent you. He's going to send you like the full MLS listing, or maybe he has some sort of offering packet that has all the information about what are the rents, what are the expenses, et cetera, right? You're going to want to know, is electricity in my name or the tenant's paying for it? What about water, sewer, trash? What about, is there gas? Is there, anything like that, right? So I've reviewed those. He sent a full disclosure packet to me. So I just went through that to see if there was any known issues in the property. This property didn't have any problems that were pointed out. You probably want to ask some specific questions about certain things like, hey, how old is the roof? If the roof is 25 years old, you're going to want to account for that when we do our analysis, right? Things like that. When do the leases expire? Because we see here, at least one of the leases was recently increased. He says increased to $750, but the materials he sent me actually show it at $1,100. So I don't know what happened there. He made a mistake, I think, in this part of the description. I wonder if he copied and pasted from another ad or something. But my point is that you want to know when those leases expire, because especially if you're below market, if they're already on a month to month, that's a good thing for you, because now you can raise those rents immediately, right? And you may want to, if you're house hacking, if you're moving into one side and renting out the other, then you're going to want to get somebody out of there. So which you can actually make the contract contingent on. Now, maybe they say no, it is a seller's market. So you got to, there's a little bit of a game to be played, but having leases that are month to month or approaching expiration, I think generally is a good thing to me, especially because you don't know who you're inheriting. So often I've had problems with tenants that I inherit because I didn't vet them. They didn't meet my criteria, my qualifications for a tenant, right? So again, this is all just informing our picture of the property, our story. Again, are pets allowed? Pet rent is great. I generally charge 35 to 50 bucks a month for pets. We already talked about washer dryer, and just in general, what are any other info that they have? A couple things before we get into the analysis. This is a website that I would plug as well. If you are not familiar with the market and you're learning about the market, you can go here to you can put in the address of the property, how many beds and baths, and it'll tell you kind of the average expected rent. So it'll give you your average, your median, your 75th percentile, your 25th percentile. So for me, I know this market, this seems very conservative. I know I'm going to be closer to the 75th percentile just based on this. This seems very conservative. Maybe that's just for this property or this market. But another way you can do that is just looking on Zillow, et cetera, right? Okay, so enough blabbling. I can talk all day about this stuff. Let's, this is the wrong thing. Let's get into the analysis, okay? The moment we've all been waiting for. So we're gonna run the numbers now for that property. So I'm just gonna, I've got dual screen, so I have the information available. So I'm just gonna convey it to you verbally rather than drive you guys nuts by constantly switching back and forth to show you where I'm getting this info. You just trust me, I have it from the listing and the information of the broker. So the way this spreadsheet works is the blue font is your inputs, your black auto populates from your inputs, right? So we're going to start left to right and then top to bottom, okay? So the first thing, purchase price. So this property was listed for $249,000. Boom, auto populate. Look at that. Now, improvements. So this is something you're going to come up with an estimate based on any known deferred maintenance issues that they highlight to you. Things like, you know, the roof, the age of the roof, the age of maybe the water heater, things like that. And then also just looking at those pictures. And again, I'm looking at the units and saying, okay, is this up to my standard, or do I want to put a little bit of money? Do I want to replace the countertops, maybe put on some new fixtures? Do I want to replace the ceiling fans and the lights and just spruce it up? Maybe put a coat of paint on everything to give it a fresh look. What kind of floors? Luxury vinyl plank are, to me, the ideal flooring for a rental because they're very resistant to things like scratches and damage. They're also water resistant as opposed to something like laminate flooring, which is very sensitive to water. So I don't like carpet. Maybe in your bedrooms have some carpet, but generally I want to put luxury vinyl plank flooring throughout. So for this property, just from what I saw, I'm going to say maybe 15,000 as a going in argument for improvements. Now, this is also where you would put in money for reserves. So even if you're buying a turnkey property, you want to have a few $1,000s set away for reserves because, you know, you never know quite what you're walking into with any property. So if you inherit a bad tenant that just suddenly stops paying rent because there's a new owner or whatever, then you want to have some reserve. You want to have some cash on hand. So, you know, $5,000, $10,000 in reserves maybe. So, you know, be conservative. Now, this is going to auto populate your closing costs. Now, this is going to be dependent on, you know, what's negotiated, what is typical for that market. So work with your title and lender to determine what those closing costs would be. Okay. Down payment. So I put in 20% just to be conservative. Again, obviously there's a lot of opportunities out there to put much less down, or maybe you just want to put more down and just be safe. Okay. Interest rate. So this is obviously something that has been very volatile the last few months. So, I mean, maybe 3 months ago, you could get one for 3.5%. Now you're looking at 5.5%. So you can probably get one for less than 5.5%, but I'm going to go with 5.5 right now based on what we're seeing. 30-year mortgage. I always want a 30-year mortgage. I don't see really a lot of benefit to going with the 15-year mortgage in most cases. And you never want to make double payments or prepayments or extra payments on your mortgage. Always just pay the minimum. Debt is cheap, especially with inflation right now. You're going to be ended up paying that mortgage off with cheaper dollars. So always do that. All right. Monthly rent. So for this property, I have unit 1 was renting for $1,150 plus $100 a month for the garage and $25 a month for the pet fees. Unit 2 was renting for $1,100 a month, $25 for pet fees, and they have 2 of the garages at $50 each a month for a total of $100. So a grand total of $2,500. Hope I did that right. And you see, as soon as we put in that monthly rent, it auto-populated a lot of this spreadsheet for us, okay? Vacancy rate. You're going to want to use 5 to 8% generally is a good going-in argument. I'm going to just throw in 6 just to be a little bit on the safe side, okay? So moving down the spreadsheet, annual revenue increase. So what this does is it's saying that you're going to increase rent by 3% every year, which I think is pretty achievable. If you're charging $1,000 a month, 3% is $30. So generally you can always raise the rent, $25, $50 a month to stay in line, keep up with inflation, stay up with the market. Now you always want to account for increasing expenses as well, right? 3%. So that gives us annual income of $30,000, less vacancy. So that basically gives us, a little over a month of vacancy. Gives us a gross income. Now, property taxes. So I have this auto calculating based on what I know Rapid City's property taxes are about 1.5%. For this, you're going to want to go to your market's tax collector website. Generally, it's listed on there. You can even look up what the current property taxes are for that specific property, or you can just call them too and say, hey, I'm looking to buy this property. Here's what it's going for. What can I expect my property taxes to be, right? You can get a pretty accurate quote that way. Insurance, much the same. You can just call your insurance broker and just say, hey, I'm looking at this property. Here's what it is. Can you give me a quote? And bada boom, bada bing, you're in business, right? So I'm going to estimate $600 a door for $1,200 a month. Now, insurance has definitely been going up these last few years, so it could even be more, but I think that's a good going in argument without making any phone calls. All right, maintenance and repairs. So typically you want a ballpark probably $750 to $1,000 a door per year. Obviously, your newer renovated properties may be less. Your older classic property might be a little bit more, depending on how maintenance intensive is. Also, maybe you have a tenant that doesn't take very good care of the property, or maybe you have a tenant that goes above and beyond and doesn't bother you with little things that break. Maybe they take care of it themselves. I've had people like that before. They are really good about, cleaning out gutters and doing kind of that extra little thing that really just alleviates me from having to hire someone if I think that needs to get done, right? So let's go with $750 a unit for $1,500 a year. It's a good going in argument. Utilities. So again, you're going to want to get the actuals from the agent and use the actuals, and then maybe you want to go a little bit more conservative. Now, I did see that in the leases, all utilities were included in the lease. Now, personally, that's like sacrilege if you ask me. The tenant should be paying that. Now, maybe this, because it's an older property, maybe this was converted into a duplex is my assumption. So that's why it's probably not separately metered. But I think it's pretty common these days to bill back the tenants for utilities. So I think that, again, if you're locked into leases, you might be locked in for now. But once those leases reset, I think you can pretty easily start charging them for utilities. So let's I'm just going to go ahead and say $300 a month. So let's call it 3,600. That's water, sewer, trash, electric, is what I'm accounting for there. So, and that, again, that's also something where you can just, you'll develop kind of rules of thumb for that market. I mean, everybody knows kind of what electric costs a month once you're familiar. Okay, advertising, not necessary for small rental. Generally, I think you can just list for free on Zillow or Craigslist or apartments.com. Probably could just delete that whole line, but maybe you want to put something else there. Administrative costs. So this is kind of just miscellaneous items. So maybe you hire an accountant to do your taxes. Maybe you utilize a lawyer once in a while if you got like an eviction or something. Maybe, especially if you're like a class C minus property, maybe your likelihood of having an eviction once a year is higher. So, maybe $1,000. Property management. So this is based as a percentage of the income. So typically in your residential income properties, your property managers are charging 8 to 10% of your gross rents. They'll also often charge 50 to 100% of first month's rent when they get a new tenant in there, right? So just something to keep in mind. Now, a lot of people in this class, I self-manage, so I'm not being charged this, but it's good to know that a property could float that if need be. If for some reason, if something happens to you and you can no longer manage the property, God forbid, then at least somebody could step in, be paid, and the property still stays afloat. I think that's just good practice to follow. Fixed costs. So if instead of a percentage, you have the option to put in a fixed cost. Now, I know that Rapid City, this property actually is being managed by someone that charges 8%. So that's why I threw that in there, but you may want to use 10% if you're not sure. CapEx. So you're always going to want to put money away each year to pay for future maintenance and capital expenditures, right? It's capital improvements. So when your roof needs to be replaced, you want to have money on hand already for that. I'd say $250 a door per year minimum, probably more, to be honest, especially these days. You might want to move up to $500 a door a year. I can tell you, I generally keep a healthy amount in my property accounts. I know some people, maybe they just keep $3,000 as a base in their account and they're happy with that reserve and everything else gets swiped into their checking account or wherever as profit. Me, I tend to just let the money pile up in there until it reaches a decent amount or I have some need for somewhere to actually put it, and then I'll swipe it out of there. But you're going to want to be putting money away for those expenses. I can tell you one of my properties last year needed a sewer line replacement. I never would have foresaw something like that, but hey, that was 9-10 grand right there, easy. So you want to be putting at least $250 a door, maybe 500. So, and then this is just sort of a catch-all. If you get some miscellaneous monthly expense, maybe landscaping, for instance, would be a big one. So a lot of times with a smaller property like this, you can get one of the tenants if it's a duplex, you could have the tenants team up and say, hey, you guys have shared responsibility for the lawn. Now that does require a little bit of policing to make sure they're keeping up with that, but don't forget about some of those recurring expenses like landscaping. If there's a HOA, you're going to want to account for that as well. So that, boom, we just accounted for all our expenses and our revenues. And you can see good sanity check. We've got 52% of the gross is our expense ratio. So that checks 50% is usually kind of your rule of thumb sanity check to know you're in the ballpark, right? So what that gives us is a net operating income of $14,000 after your mortgage. So this calculates the mortgage at 5.5% is going to be $13,572 a year, which leaves us with total cash flow of $787. Okay. So that's giving us a cash on cash return of 1.15%. So definitely at this point, I'm going, well, that's not very exciting. I'm not looking to invest in real estate to get a 1% return, right? Especially with inflation, that's nothing. Now, I think part of what's going on is that because interest rates have skyrocketed in the last 2 months, the market is still finding an equilibrium with that. So who knows? Like if this property was listed 3 months from now, maybe this purchase price will be a little bit lower, right? But this is our kind of going in argument for how this property looks. So now what we can do is we can start fine tuning our analysis to see if we can actually do a little better. So now I kind of go back and say, okay, what can I adjust to improve that? Right now, right away, if you're self-managing, you can come to this property manager. Now, this is more out of curiosity. Like I said, you want to float no matter what. But if I put 0 in because I'm self-managing, okay, I'm getting first year 4.4%. Still not great, but it's not 1%. So other things you can do. Okay, purchase price. So they're asking $249. Now this is a seller's market. Are you going to get them to come down from their purchase price? Maybe, maybe not. Investment properties, often there's maybe a little bit more negotiating room, but it's tough. But, hey, maybe we say, no, I think they're overpriced. I'm going to offer $240. Okay, well, what does that do? Okay, it brings up to a 2%. Still not really doing much. Now, this is probably where you're going to end up looking at. So your monthly rent. So I know they have a 3-bedroom renting for $1,150 a month. And I know that in that market, a 3-bedroom, I mean, there's 3 bedrooms that probably go for $2,000 a month, right? So I'm pretty confident that you could probably get $1,300 to $1,400 for that 3-bedroom pretty conservatively. So let's just say $300. So that's a $150 increase. They're also only charging $25 for a pet. They could probably up that to $50 a month, right? People pay a lot of money for their pets. I have people that pay me, like I said, I charge $25, $35 for a small dog, like something less than 20 pounds, 25 pounds. If it's a full-size dog, I'm charging $50 a month. So I have people that have paid me $100, $150 a month for their pets, right? So I know that looking at this property, I can be pretty safe in saying, you know what, I'm going to be able to increase both their pet rents by $25, increase the 3-bedroom by $150, and maybe increase the 2-bedroom by $50. So that gives me a net of what, $250. So if I make this $2,750, how does that change things? Okay, 5.8%. So now, okay, we're moving in the right direction. You see how big of an effect that had? Now, again, maybe that's still not meeting our criteria. Most people are looking for probably 6 to 10% is what they're looking for, cash on cash. Now, cash on cash, if you're not familiar with this term, cash on cash return, what that means is the total amount of cash you put up, what is your return on that on an annual basis, right? So if you're getting $3,900 on an outlay of $66,000, that's a 5.8% return, right? Now, again, this is with property management. So I can, again, come and I can move that needle and I go, oh, wow, now it's getting 9.5%. So, this is a case where I think this doesn't look too bad, right? Because even though you're self-managing, I think sometimes you kind of have to be realistic in current market. I mean, there's only 3 properties for sale in the entire market. One of them is for $520,000 for a duplex. So I'm not even interested in that at all. So if you want to get in the game, maybe you have to say, you know what? I think there's an adjustment of expectation that's occurring right now, especially with the way interests have been and the high demand for investment properties. maybe it's no longer reasonable to expect 8-10% right off the bat with a rental property. So you say, you know what, the first couple of years, yeah, maybe I'm earning less rent, but the market will mature over time. You're going to do a lot better. I can tell you that I've bought properties at market where I was probably earning 3 to 5%. Like my second property I bought, probably only getting 3 to 5% cash on cash. That's not really true because I really didn't put any money down, put very little into that property. So on a percentage basis, it was good. It was probably better, but I digress. The point I'm making is that often with rental properties, they will kind of mature over the first, 3 to 5 years, where it takes a little bit of time to kind of bring the rents up to market, make those improvements to kind of figure out how you can maximize value in it, right? Is there a washer dryer in every unit, or can you add it, right? Maybe that all doesn't happen in year one. And that's another thing to point out. So the way this is built is that it auto populates all this, right? So what you may want to do is, if I'm going to copy that, I'm going to paste it into year 2. I'm going to overwrite this. I'm going to put in year 2 what you would call that your pro forma rent. So that's what you think you can achieve, right? 32,880. And then I'm going to come up and put my in-place rent. And that's going to give you a more accurate representation of, hey, upon purchase, I'm earning 5% cash on cash. But after I've executed my business plan, now I'm bringing it up to 9%, right? So if you're getting this property at 240, you're only putting 15 into it, and you're able to achieve that rent increase of $250 a month, then yeah, this is maybe a pretty good self-managed investment, right? There it is with property management. Again, property management sucks all your profit out. So that's tough. So that's basically how you do an analysis. Now I added this exit strategy box as well. So this has some levers that you can pull as well to get an idea of what you're going to exit this property at, right? So there's appreciation. Now, this is obviously very speculative, so don't go throwing in 5% a year appreciation. This is what the property would appreciate at per year. So 2%, yeah, I think you can plan on getting about 2% appreciation per year. I'm saying if I hold for 10 years, what is this property going to perform at, right? And this is saying, okay, your annualized return is going to be 14%. You're in an equity multiple of 2.3 for a total profit of $92,000. Okay. Now I also put in there selling costs, so maybe you can do a little bit better than that, but again, pretty conservative, right? So you can come in here and you can just kind of play with this stuff. Maybe you're in a market where you think you're going to get 3%, but it's helpful just to see, okay, just going from 2% appreciation to 3% appreciation brought my annualized return up by 3%. So it's fun to just see how those levers work, right? So if we put that at 2% and I say, no, I'm going to get out in 5 years. I don't want to hold this thing for 10. What's your annualized return, right? That seems low for what this should be, but what if I'm self-managing? Okay, 9%. That seems low. So yeah, 5%, 9%. I'm not buying that. Just keep in mind when you're dealing with a spreadsheet like this that has a lot of auto population, sometimes when you start overriding some of those formulas and stuff, how it can affect other parts of the spreadsheet. So just be careful. But overall, I think that gives a good indication of, what you can expect, right? So, okay, that was about, once I got through the MLS spiel and everything, I think that was about 20 minutes. I think I was pretty close. I probably talked long on certain portions because I pontificate. That should be a good, and it's also something that as you do it and you get comfortable and you do it multiple times, every time you do it, you get a little bit faster and more comfortable and you just get better at it. It happens pretty quick, I think. So sometimes, especially if you're starting out, you just go onto the MLS, find properties like this and analyze them just to kind of, it's like a muscle that you got to exercise. So you can just go on there and just get familiar with it. Right. Thank you for attending, and I appreciate you coming. I hope you learned something. Look me up, mach1equity.com, if you're looking for passive investment opportunities. If you decide that this is too much work or too much stress and you don't want to deal with it, then you can find me there. We've got some exciting investments coming up down the pipe. So, all right, take care. Cheers, guys.